Hey everyone, I hope you're having a great start to your week. My name is Garrett McLaughlin. In the exercise of the week this week, I want to cover what's called hip extension, passive range liftoff. So long name for a very simple drill, but if we think about running specifically, running, walking, again, most functional movements on a daily basis, right? Not talking about strength training necessarily, but as we move through life, we want to be able to get into enough hip extension. Hip extension is the motion that allows us to push the floor away, push the ground away to propel our bodies forward. Oftentimes just due to either sitting, tightness in the hip flexors, immobility in the hip, weakness throughout that posterior chain, or just lack of time or experience getting into hip extension, we're often very limited in that range of motion. So this drill is very isolated to the hip joint. It helps teach you how to isolate and get into hip extension without compensating again at the lower back, opening the rib cage, overusing the hamstring. I see this as being very necessary for people for a variety of reasons. A lot of people that I see with hamstring tendinopathy or a history of hamstring strains or tightness have trouble getting into hip extension. Also, people, piriformis syndrome, sciatic nerve issues, anything through the lower back, whether it's lower back tightness or history of some type of herniated disc or bulged disc or facet joint issues of the lower back, we need to make sure our hip is getting into extension. If we're not getting into extension, something else has to work a little bit harder to help get us forward, whether we're starting to open up and extend the spine, overuse the hamstring. There's a lot of different compensations that can happen from this. So I definitely recommend, even if you're not, again, think, I don't need that, I would definitely test yourself out with this drill just to see how you feel. Use it as a self-assessment to some degree. But also using it as an exercise on a regular basis, because this is going to provide that push off, that range of motion as you drive and push off from one step to the next as you go through walking and running. So just to show you, I'm going to move this. What we're going to do is go face down. I want to create tension into the ground. So I'm actually going to put my hands up overhead. I'm going to push my hands into the ground. I'm going to engage my core, try to tighten up all of these muscles to the upper half and other hip. I'm actually going to drive my other leg down into the ground so I can then create some stiffness throughout the system or irradiate that I can then engage and isolate that hip joint that I'm trying to move. Biggest thing we want to stay away from is as we extend the hip, we don't want our lower back, again, to do too much or to actually go into extension. We want to really use our core to hold this area, hold the pelvis in place as we isolate the hip joint. So it's very specific to the hip joint. Now, if I'm in, hopefully with the breathing, when the microphone's not too annoying for you, but I might stay up in this position just so I'm not down here and it's too loud for you guys. But I'm in this position face down. I would rest my head on my hands, right? Forehead on hands. And then like I mentioned, I want to create tension and push down into the ground. So I'm going to actually push my hands in the ground, engage the abs strong, and I'm going to move my left leg into extension. So I'm going to drive my left foot. Either I can go here, if that feels better for you, or I can go with the toes pointed, whatever you prefer on this one, as long as you're driving down and creating tension. And then I'm just going to show you a series of probably 5 repetitions, holding each one for 3 to 5 seconds, getting as high as you can into extension, trying to stay away from any cramping. As you get into the end ranges of some of these positions, it's common to feel cramping. You might feel this in your lower back. You might feel this in your hamstring. There's a couple of areas that you might notice then. But we want to stay out of the cramping as much as possible. So going to that limit, we're never exceeding that because that's going to almost set us back as we perform this drill. But as we get better at this, we expand our range of motion. That's when we go higher, and I'll show you some progressions of this in a second. So let's show you 5 reps. So that's all it is, right? Very simple hip extension. Passive range liftoff is where we're setting ourselves up at the end range of motion and we're lifting off from there. Now, to expand our range of motion, right, we might need to work on some flexibility, some mobility, hips, hip flexors, quads, rectus femoris, those areas to access, to open up more motion that we can get into extension. That's part of the thing here. Again, one piece of the puzzle. Do we need to just work on extending the hip, or do we need to actually open things up and then extend the hip? It really depends on that evaluation to see kind of what is your weak link or weak links, so there's multiple sometimes. Now, we can set ourselves up passively. I talked about progressions a second ago. Set ourselves up passively at a higher, greater range of motion to extension. So then again, really in the end, I'm not trying to go up as high as possible and go through this whole range of motion. I'm trying to set myself up already kind of on the borderline of that challenging range of motion, and then I'm just trying to lift off, right? So that's where you get the passive range lift off. Over time here, as I get better, as I step my leg up here, I get better, I can do that. I'm gonna step my leg up here. And then maybe I'm gonna set my leg up here. I'm gonna find different objects, whether it's a textbook, a yoga block, a foam roller, whatever you have around the house just to set yourself up to a higher level to start. And that's how we know we're improving hip extension. So from here, you can see I'm already in, I don't know, 5 degrees of hip extension here. Okay, so I can feel that hip into extension already. I'm going to just, again, I'm going to talk up here just so I'm not yelling at you guys through the microphone, but create tension, push into the ground, gauge my abs strong, drive my right leg into the ground, and then from here, all I want to do is, can I lift and relax? So you can see for me, right, this is tricky. I'm a little tighter in my hips. As I'm lifting up there, I'm feeling my hamstring start to take over to a degree, like it wants to work a lot harder than it was in the other position, because now I'm in a position where my hips are tight, my hamstring wants to work harder to help me into extension, so I'm trying to really fire from that hip joint, the glute primarily more than the hamstring to get my leg up, but I'm going to show you a couple reps because it's a little bit more shaky on this one than the other one. Hopefully you can pick this up through the video. But you can see from there, if you compare this, how high I lifted up here compared to when I had that on the ground, again, much less because I'm starting in a greater degree of extension, but I can go up depending on how much range of motion I need, right? So this depends on the person, this depends on the activity you're trying to allow this to translate to. Again, we don't need more just to get more. How much is enough to allow us to function, again, the best way possible in that activity? So running, again, can we get 5 to 10 degrees of hip extension, right? We want to make sure most people are not really getting their hips into extension. That's where we're compensating with the hamstring and the lower back. So I want to progress them probably to this level maximum. If I was working with, we'll say, a ballerina or a gymnast, you better believe we're trying to get a big range of hip extension, range of motion, because that's going to translate more over to the sport. So it's really person specific, also activity specific, how much you need. But I would do on this one, probably a set or two of 10 repetitions, every repetition holding 3 to 5 seconds. I like to add this within a warm-up of a strength training routine. This is almost like more of a prep exercise for me. Pretty challenging, but we can do this early in some type of warm-up circuit before the strength training routine, or do it again alongside your running in some way. Make sure you're not walking into cramp city. You go too high, you overstress the hamstring or lower back, things are gonna cramp up on you. Find your level, start at the ground, work up one level at a time to slowly improve your active hip extension rather than forcing things, and then from there, again, once something cramps, it's always gonna tighten up on you, so you don't wanna kind of defeat the purpose of the exercise, but we wanna push into that to some degree. But that's it, hip extension, passive range liftoff, fantastic exercise. I definitely recommend this is one if you need to try as a self-assessment, add into your routine, see if you can progress up and build some good control through hip extension, because that's what's going to help propel the body. Whether you want to run longer, run faster, run stronger, hip extension is one of the main ranges of motion we want to have in the human body as a whole. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. Please feel free to comment, provide feedback, questions below in the comment section. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Thanks again for checking this out.